Hey, welcome back to Mountain Men Axes, and today we're going to discuss one of the more controversial topics when it comes to hanging an axe. So, let's say you've gone to the flea market, you've found a nice head that you like, and you've picked up a handle from Buck and Billy Ray, T&D Handle Company, Whiskey River, Stumptown, you name it, Beaver. What's the one? I can't remember that one, but it'll come to me. But nevertheless, you've got yourself a head and a handle, and you want to figure out how to fit your wedge. You've got your handle fit, and your head slides onto your axe handle. Your kerf is cut at least more than a third of the way. So if your axe head goes down, your kerf, here's what we're going to be using today as our example axe head for our wedge fitting. This is a Rixford R55, which that signifies the date. R55. And then this is a Rixford. Now, this is a larger Dayton pattern. And so we are going to use this today as our example axe. And so the eye is straight, right? We have our wedge and we have our handle. Now we want our kerf cut. Let's say for example's sake, this is our handle, right? It fits on. There we go. Okay, our kerf is cut. We know at least 1/3 of the way down. So 1/3 would be about right there. We want a little bit, I personally like about, to each their own, I like 5/8, more than a half, so 5/8 of the way down. So I like about there. Not completely 3/4, but about 5/8 of the way down the axe head. I like the kerf cut. So in this example, we need to fit our wedge to our eye, right? We've got a square end here and a square end here. But on our axe head, on our axe eye here, we don't have that. We have a tapered round edge and a half moon shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over some of the ways that we can fit the axe head and the wedge. So join me today and we'll learn something. So let's start off by clearing out the handle. You can get a drift or you can get I like to use a large extension, one that I'm not going to use anymore because the steel works better. It doesn't absorb any of the shock. And so it goes straight to the handle. All right, so here we are. We're looking at the eye of our axe, and it doesn't fit. There's a few ways we can go about this, right? You can go about it by one, marking, so taking it, right? Taking a pencil and marking right there where we know we're hitting, okay? So I'll move you over so you can see. So right there, in particular, we know that that's catching, okay? We can mark it like that, or we can mark it like this. We can put our square up to the front of the eye, put our wedge to it, right? And mark it that way, okay? Bring our wedge all the way to the back, bring this to the front of the eye, and then mark it that way. What I like to do, because it really isn't that difficult, right? A lot of people overthink this step, but they undervalue this step. For a long time in my journey, I undervalued the kind of how important fitting the wedge really is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it big anyway. I already know that. So I'm just going to get it close. I'm going to mark a mark here. As you can see, that's not gigantic. I'm still going to take my square and I'm going to find my mark. Again, I'm going to run it up. So now I have a full mark on there, right? Now there's a few ways we can go about this. I also like to mark the top as well to make sure if I cut it with a saw that I don't cut it at an angle. I do that with stone. I do that with wood. Anything that I'm cutting a long distance, I also want to see that I'm cutting it straight. So if I were going to cut it like this, I would want to see the face. But I'm going to be cutting it today like this. So let's step back. Let's take a look. We'll release the axe head. We will put in our wedge. Now I do like to use a Japanese pull saw for this because there's a little bit more finesse involved when using a Japanese pull saw. And so I'll be using the cross section instead of the rip section. Now we've made a pencil line to fit the axe eye. I'm going to leave the line, right? So if you leave the line, that allows you to not only see where you're working towards, but it allows you to see that you haven't gone past that point. So make your line, leave your line, and then cut, using your line as a guide. So let's do that now. As we get closer to the bottom, it's going to get easier because the wedge is getting thinner. So now that we've got it sized, approximately sized, what we want to do is we want to put the head back in our holding system, whether that be a clamp, whether that be a shave horse, whether that be a vise, however you're using or whatever you're using to hold the axe head, go ahead and throw it back in there. Okay, so now we see that we're close, right? Got a little bit right there where it broke off before it got to it. That's no big deal. We can take a spoke shave and just trim that off. Really, honestly, as easy as that. A spoke shave, you can use a knife. You can use just about whatever you want. More than a few times, I've found myself with a detail sander just sanding it down. Now remember, we've got a flat edge still, right? We just cut a square, so we just want it to be close. Now if I really jammed it, look, if I really jam it, I can get it in there. I can get it started. But I don't want that. I want this to be tapered and fit to this size. So what we're going to do is we're going to start sanding away at the corners. We're going to pretend as if we don't have a sander, a grinder, or any mechanical means to make this wedge, because I don't want you guys to think that you can't do this without help, because you can do this with sandpaper, a knife. You can make a wedge fit beautifully without any additional help. So just grab our sandpaper and we're just going to start sanding away, right? And what I'm doing, I'm not trying to make a round, I'm trying to make a bevel. Because once I make a bevel across this, I can then round the bevel. It's easier to start with a bevel and then work your way to a round when you're using sandpaper. So I want to grab a little bit more aggressive piece of sandpaper, but I don't think I have it. So we're just going to keep on working. You can still see our line, which is good. It's one of the reasons I say leave your line. That allows you to always have that reference point to go by to make sure you haven't gone too far. How far down do you want the wedge to go? Well, it depends on how deep your kerf is, for one. So you can measure that by putting your axe head on your handle and using a saw blade or something very thin. I like to use this to check mine. So all right. So we've started to get a little bit of a round going here. So let's see where we're at. Oh, now we're in there without forcing it. Okay, cool. What does the back look like? Well, the back is also round, but it's not tapered like the front end is. This tapers to a smaller round than this does. This is more like an 1/8 inch radius versus a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch radius in the back, probably a 1/2 inch. And so we want to barely round the back, right? We want to just make it, honestly, and I'll show you a cool little way that we can do that. And that's just by beveling the edges like we discussed. Okay, we can bevel it with a knife. Okay, there's one side. There's the other. And so now we have two semi-rounded edges. Now that those are knocked down a little bit, we'll take a little sandpaper and smooth them out. See where we ended up. Okay, not bad. But we're not quite at that D shape yet. And in the front, we're not quite at that. No, just a little bit of ways away. And the beautiful thing about that is you can see right there, that ding where we're starting to catch. So we know where we need to make improvements. Now, let's see. This, for example, is a sanding block that you can pick up at any Walmart or Dollar General, just about anywhere. You can pick up a sanding block. And for wedges, I would recommend a coarse. If you have a hardwood wedge, it's going to be a little bit more difficult and you'll have to put in a little bit more time, but believe me when I say the time is well worth it. Your wedge is also going to depend on how your axe handle eye fits. So, depending on how tight your handle is, if your handle is really tight in the front and loose in the back, we're going to make it smaller in the back than we are in the front. So the back is going to be, we're going to sand this area right here in the front down thinner. So this wedge will be thicker, thinner, 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 and it'll gradually get thinner as it goes forward. I'm just telling you, not from a position of authority, how to do this, but from what I've learned while making wedges. And I've learned over the years that I've not put enough emphasis in the wedge aspect of it. I've done wedges without molding them at all, leaving them square for a time period. I thought that was better. And whatever split off was a tighter fit. That wasn't true. Sometimes I would lose full sections of the wedge because it was catching. There were times when I would just round the front a little bit and the back a little bit, get it started like this, and call that good. That was not good either. It would start as the eye tapers. It would start to get stuck, and then I'm bashing it in unnecessarily. And so I'm not only fighting the handle, but I'm fighting my eye. You should not have to fight your axe eye. This should freely go almost all the way into your handle. You can test that by flipping the wedge around and checking to see if you're close that way as well. As you can see, we're getting further and further into the eye. I do like to take a file that matches the front of the eye and just see where I'm at and make sure there's no obstructions. Not only do I clean out the eye, but also just make sure there's nothing in there that's going to hold me up. I will take also a wire brush. None of these that I'm mentioning right now are really 100% necessary for fitting the wedge, but they're things that I like to do beforehand just to kind of make sure that there's nothing in there to trick me, to make me think that I'm tighter than I really am. And then once I clean it out, my wedge is loose. So I just want to make sure that the eye is prepped fully beforehand. Now, for those of you that do have a sander, you can grab your sander, grab your wedge, and do like I said, bevel, 1, 2, 3, just little bevels, right? See the bevel there? That's your D shape, what we're doing there. 1, 2, 3. Okay? What I like to do is I like to set the wedge on there and roll it. Set the wedge on there and roll it. I'll do the same for the front. A little bit more aggressively because I know that it's a tapered fit. I don't want you guys that have a sander to feel like you're being left out. But you don't need that to get this job done. Okay, I can see that I'm having to go in at somewhat of an angle here. I'm having to go in like this. So what we want to do, we want to recognize that early, find out where our sticking point is, and mark that. So let's see. Where are we hitting? Oh, there we go. We just had a breakthrough where we jumped down. We're jumping down still, right? Now let's look at the front of the eye. The front of the eye is completely filled here. So we look good there. I'm happy with that. Now, the back of the eye is actually rounded as well to fit. I'm happy with that. But what we need is we need more depth. So we still need to bring it down a fair amount. So it was catching right there. So from there up, we need work. From here down can remain the same. Just like hafting the eye to the handle, the top portion of the eye that you've got fit doesn't need any more work. You need to work on the lower portion. Same goes here. The lower portion doesn't need any more work, but the top portion does. I have lost my fair share of fingernails. Oh yeah, slides right down. Okay, but we need a little more taper right here for that to fill that eye. Now that we've dropped, we've got to taper this more because this is getting thicker. So I'm just going to take the sandpaper. and taper that eye. Okay, and what it appears is that this eye on the top is a little bit forward, and the metal and steel underneath kind of sticks out. So as this gets deeper and deeper, we're going to hit underneath and not hit fully flush up against the top. I'm okay with that because it's still a very, very tight fit. So beautiful. And I know that hammering this, it's going to go much further. Now, so let's mark it. Let's see where we're at. It's pretty good. Okay. So once we hit it a few times, it's going to go most likely the rest of the way. So all we've done here is we've set up our wedge before it was cut. We put a pencil mark. To recap, we put a pencil mark. We made a straight line. We used a Japanese pull saw. It has two different options. You have a cross cut or a rip cut, and that allows you to pick depending on the wood you have, but that also allows you to pick because we're cross cutting and not rip cutting across the grain. So this is a perfect use for that tool, and I really like it doing that, and I like it trimming the proudness of the axe. So we cut it down. We left our line so we could see to make it match our radius in the front and in the back. We fit there. We said, okay, we're good, we're good, we're good, right? And then we kept going. And so from here, this is the point right here where the axe eye will sometimes kick you back like that and then sink further. So sometimes you're not going to get, as a matter of fact, the majority of the time you're not going to get, and that's where the pounding comes into play, you're not going to get a complete filling of your axe eye. Sometimes the wedge will crack, sometimes it'll break in the middle. Now don't be afraid if that happens. Axe wedges break all the time in the process of hafting. When you cut your axe eye, once it's done, if you decide to leave it proud or flush, you really won't notice the crack. Now, I personally like to use glue for several reasons, but some people don't like to use glue for several reasons. One, so they can pull the wedge if it needs to be rehafted. If they need to take the wedge out and rehaft it, they can do so with relative ease. But I'll argue to that, and not necessarily argue, but to my point, what I do with mine is I have a bit that's sized appropriately, and I'll just drill my wedge out. I usually don't like to use step wedges or conical wedges unless it's going to be 100%, I'm keeping this in my vehicle and this is going to be a user, or it's going on my fallen belt and I'm taking it out with me. But most cases, those are production axes. And so I'll buy a council tool for that. I do like the council tool boys axe. I think those work really well for falling. But if you guys have any questions about how to make your wedge, let me know. I'll ramble. It's 30 minutes in, and we're talking about fitting a wedge to an axe eye, so understandably. But guys and girls, it's not hard. Just spend the extra time. If I can give you any piece of advice, it's spend the extra time on the wedge. It's worth it, and it's going to make your haft 50% better. If you have a good fit on your handle and you have a good hang, do not drop the ball on the wedge. The wedge is important. The wedge is more important than you know. I made that mistake for a long time, and I try not to do it anymore, but we're all human, so that's how to fit a wedge. This will, by the way, this will be probably the next head that we hang. So I like my Rixford 1955. So that's how much we have shy. Wait, okay. That's how much we have shy of hitting the wedge. So once we hammer that in, we can go all the way. But, yep. Until next time, stay at the flea markets, stay at the estate sales, the yard sales. The guys that I hear from that don't have flea markets in their area, man, go to yard sales, go to estate sales. Those are great places. Listen, if there was ever a time when we need to be prepared, it's now. Get your axes, get your saws, get your mix, your fuel, your chainsaw fuel, your mixes. Get everything that you can get and stay prepared. I don't wish harm on anybody, and I just hope that the people that watch this channel have a prepared mindset and a certain preparedness level. When this channel first started years ago, it was called Mountain Men Militia, and I thought that was a little bit aggressive, after a little bit of time. And so, even though I was still doing axes and axe content, I thought it was a little bit aggressive. So we went with Mountain Men Axes. And so I don't regret that. I'm glad we did it. But the mindset, I want to be the same. You have my back. I have your back. We are a community. And by the way, if y'all are still here, which I don't know if you are, if y'all want to get together, we can get together at the Bluff City Flea Market one Saturday and then go from there. There's a million places to go in East Tennessee, but we can go from there to any number of places. But I think it'd be awesome for all of you guys to come down to the Bluff City Flea Market and experience it, man. We could do videos. We could do whatever we need to do. I think you guys will find a lot of axes that you'll like. And I'm inviting you up, man. Come on, well, or down, depending on where you're at. Come on up or come on down. And thanks for watching and putting up with me. See you later.